The Hells Angels biker saw the little girl running from a pickup in the sandstorm, and his strike ended the chase forever. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. On a desolate stretch of road in the middle of nowhere, a violent sandstorm raged, casting an eerie orange haze across the desert. Jake "Reaper" Morrison, a Hells Angels biker known for his cold demeanor and unshakable focus, had his hands firmly gripping the handlebars of his Harley-Davidson as the wind howled around him. The storm whipped against his leather jacket, but he was used to the chaos of the open road. Yet, something felt different this time. As he navigated the treacherous path, a faint sound pierced through the howling winds, a scream. At first, he thought it was just the wind playing tricks on him. But then he heard it again, clearer this time. A child's cry. Without a second thought, Jake slammed the throttle down, his powerful bike roaring to life as he darted toward the sound. His mind raced. It wasn't typical to stop in a storm like this, especially for someone in his line of work. Hells Angels didn't intervene in every situation they encountered, but the desperation in that scream was undeniable. The storm had reduced visibility to almost nothing, but Jake's trained eyes spotted the shape of a little girl running through the sand, her small figure barely visible against the backdrop of the swirling dust. Behind her, a pickup truck barreled forward, its engine growling as it closed the distance between them. She was running for her life, her small legs barely able to keep up with the relentless pursuit of the truck. Without hesitation, Jake revved his engine and sped toward them, cutting through the storm like a predator on a hunt. As he approached, the truck swerved dangerously, clearly trying to box the girl in. The terror on her face was evident even through the veil of dust. She looked back, her eyes wide with fear, and in that moment, Jake made a split-second decision that would change everything. His hands moved instinctively, guiding the motorcycle directly in front of the pickup, cutting off its path. The truck screeched to a halt, its tires sliding on the loose sand. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he quickly dismounted from his bike, his boots sinking into the soft ground. The little girl was now on the ground, her body trembling from exhaustion and fear. She looked up at him, wide-eyed, her breath shallow as she struggled to comprehend the situation. The man in the truck shouted at her, his voice muffled by the storm, but Jake's attention was solely on the girl. He crouched down beside her, his voice soft but firm. "You're safe now, kid. Stay with me." She flinched at his words, still unsure whether to trust him. His Hells Angels patch, the leather jacket, and the rough exterior of his appearance probably made him seem just as dangerous as the man in the truck. But Jake knew better than anyone the power of a calm presence in the chaos. He extended a hand to her, gently, carefully, not wanting to startle her. Slowly, she reached out, her small fingers brushing against his, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, the storm seemed to quiet down. "You're okay. I'm not going to hurt you," Jake reassured her, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man who had spent years building walls around his emotions. Just then, the pickup truck revved its engine again, this time attempting to push past Jake. But Jake wasn't having it. He stepped in front of the truck, his imposing figure blocking its way. With a few sharp words, Jake made it clear to the driver that this wasn't a fight he was willing to lose. The driver, realizing he was outmatched, hesitated, then slowly reversed, his truck kicking up more sand as it retreated. Jake kept his eyes locked on the man until the truck disappeared into the storm. When he turned back to the girl, he could see the tears in her eyes, but also the relief that began to wash over her. She wasn't alone anymore. And for Jake, that feeling, that moment of doing something good, was something he hadn't felt in years. But he knew this was just the beginning. He couldn't let her go back to that truck, to whatever nightmare she was running from. He was going to make sure she was safe, no matter what. The chase may have ended for now, but something told him that the real story was just about to unfold. I watched the pickup truck retreat into the storm, its taillights fading as the roar of the engine faded into the howling winds. Jake stood there, frozen for a moment, processing what had just happened. The little girl was safe for now, but there was no telling who else was out there looking for her. He could feel the weight of the situation settling in, knowing that he had to do more than just scare off the man in the truck. He turned to face the girl, who was still crouched in the sand, her small frame trembling from exhaustion. "You okay?" he asked softly, kneeling down in front of her. She looked up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes, nodding but not saying anything. Jake offered her his hand, helping her to her feet. The wind was relentless, the storm still raging around them, but in this moment, everything felt eerily still. "Come on," he said, his voice a bit firmer now. "Let's get you somewhere safe." He led her to his bike, and for the first time, she seemed to trust him, slowly climbing onto the back. Jake revved the engine, the powerful machine roaring to life as he sped through the sandstorm, the girl holding on tight to his waist. The wind howled in their ears, and the world around them was nothing but a blur of dust and sand. The highway stretched out before them, an endless ribbon of asphalt cutting through the desert, but Jake had no idea where he was going. All he knew was that he couldn't leave her out here. As they rode, Jake couldn't help but wonder what had driven the little girl to run like that, and what kind of life she had been living. He wasn't one for asking questions, but something about her made him want to know. He glanced over his shoulder, and despite the storm, he could see her eyes focused on the road behind them, scanning for any signs of danger. She was alert, scared, but strong. He had to admire that. After a while they reached a small town, nothing more than a handful of houses and a couple of businesses. Jake didn't know the area well, but it seemed like a place where they could find shelter for the night. He slowed the bike down as they approached an old motel, its neon sign flickering weakly against the storm. He pulled into the parking lot and cut the engine, the noise of the storm outside now the only sound. "You can stay here tonight," Jake said, dismounting and helping her off the bike. She didn't speak, but there was a glimmer of relief in her eyes. As Jake led her into the motel office, the man behind the counter looked up, surprised to see the biker and the little girl standing there. "You guys need a room?" he asked, his voice low. Jake nodded. "Yeah, we'll take one for the night." The man handed him a key, and Jake turned to lead the girl down the narrow hallway. The motel room was small, the kind of place Jake was used to. Nothing fancy, just a bed and a roof over your head. He set the girl down on the bed and went to the bathroom to wash the dust from his face. He was tired. The storm had drained him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. He didn't know why the girl had been running, but he knew she wasn't safe yet. The storm outside raged on, but inside the room, it was quiet, calm. He walked back into the main room and sat down in the chair across from the girl. She was staring at the floor, her small hands clasped together tightly in her lap. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Jake broke the silence. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The girl hesitated for a moment, then looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lily." Jake nodded, his expression softening. "All right, Lily. You're safe here for now." She didn't respond, but Jake could see the small flicker of trust in her eyes. He wasn't used to dealing with kids, but something about this felt different. He felt responsible for her now. They didn't talk much after that, both of them lost in their own thoughts. As the night wore on, Jake couldn't help but wonder what kind of life she had been living, what she was running from, and if he could really protect her from whatever was coming next. The storm outside grew fiercer, and Jake knew that this was just the calm before the real storm. He had no idea what would happen next, but he knew he couldn't walk away now. Whatever her past was, whatever she was running from, Jake was in this fight now, and he wasn't going to let her face it alone. I sat in the chair across from Lily, watching the storm rage outside. The wind howled, and the rain slammed against the windows like 1,000 tiny fists. Inside, the motel room was small, but it was a safe haven, at least for now. Lily sat on the bed, her legs curled beneath her, her eyes focused on the floor. She hadn't said much since they arrived, but Jake knew better than to push her. She was scared. He could feel it. He wasn't used to comforting kids, especially ones who had clearly been through so much. He'd spent his life being tough, not showing emotion, never letting anyone get too close. But something about Lily made him want to change that. Something about her made him feel responsible, like he had to protect her no matter what. The minutes stretched into hours, and Jake finally broke the silence. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked quietly. Lily looked up at him, her eyes hesitant, but she nodded slowly. "I was running away," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. From my dad. Jake's stomach tightened at her words. He had a feeling this wasn't just about some random man chasing her down the road. He was hurting me, she continued, her voice shaking. And I couldn't take it anymore. I just wanted to get away. Jake's heart went out to her, but he kept his face neutral. He couldn't let his emotions show, not now. Not when she needed him to stay strong. You did the right thing, he said, his voice low and steady. You're safe now, okay? She nodded again, but Jake could see the pain in her eyes. It wasn't over for her, not yet. He could tell by the way she flinched whenever the storm's thunder roared outside, or the way she tensed up whenever there was a loud noise. She was constantly on edge. Jake had seen that kind of fear before, but this time, it felt different. This wasn't just about the storm. This was about everything she had been running from. There was a knock on the door, and Jake immediately stood up, his instincts kicking in. He was used to being on guard, always watching, always prepared for something to go wrong. He walked over to the door and looked through the peephole. It was a man, his face partially obscured by the hood of his jacket, but Jake could tell from his stance that he was trouble. His gut told him that this wasn't just some random guy at the door. Who is it? Jake called out, keeping his voice firm. The man outside didn't respond at first. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice low and threatening. I know she's in there. I need her back. Jake's grip tightened around the doorknob. He wasn't sure who this guy was, but he had a feeling he wasn't just here to talk. Lily's father, maybe? Jake's mind raced, running through possibilities. She's not going anywhere, Jake said, his voice calm but steady. You need to leave, now. The man outside didn't move, didn't even flinch. Instead, he gave a low chuckle, one that made Jake's blood run cold. You really think you can stop me? He asked, his tone dripping with malice. Jake's fingers curled into fists. This was it. This was the moment he had been preparing for. He wasn't about to let some thug take Lily back. Not after everything she had been through. Not after what he had promised her. He opened the door slowly, his body blocking the way. The man outside glared at him, sizing him up. I don't want any trouble, Jake said, keeping his voice steady. But I'll do what I have to do to protect her. The man's eyes flickered with something, recognition maybe? But he didn't back down. Instead, he reached for something inside his jacket. Jake was ready. His hand shot out faster than the man could react, grabbing him by the wrist and twisting it behind his back. The guy grunted in pain, but Jake wasn't letting go. He knew the kind of danger they were dealing with. He had seen it before. You're not taking her, Jake said, his voice low and menacing. The man struggled for a moment, but Jake's grip was unyielding. Finally, the man stopped resisting, his body going limp in defeat. You think you've won? The man spat. This isn't over. Jake didn't respond. He just pushed the man away, forcing him to stumble back into the parking lot. As the man turned and walked away, Jake slammed the door shut and locked it. He stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, the adrenaline still pumping through his veins. Lily was safe for now, but Jake knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He turned to her, his face softening. You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you. Lily looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude, but there was still that flicker of fear. She was still running, still haunted by the past. And Jake wasn't about to let her face it alone. The storm outside raged on, but inside the room, a new kind of storm was brewing. One that Jake wasn't ready for, but one he knew he had to face. For Lily, and for himself. I sat in the quiet of the motel room, listening to the storm howl outside. The wind was relentless, pushing against the windows as if it wanted to tear them from their frames. But inside it was still. For now, Lily was safe, but Jake knew that feeling wouldn't last long. He couldn't shake the tension that hung in the air. It wasn't just the storm outside. There was something else, something lurking, waiting to break through. He looked over at Lily, sitting quietly on the bed, her knees hugged to her chest. She had been through so much already, and Jake couldn't help but wonder what other dangers were out there waiting for her. He had promised her safety, but could he really protect her from everything? There was a knock at the door, a sharp sound that cut through the silence. Jake's instincts flared. His hand went to the pocket of his leather jacket, where the handle of his switchblade rested. He didn't move, waiting for the sound to come again. The knock came again, louder this time. He stood up slowly, moving to the door with quiet, deliberate steps. His hand was on the doorknob when Lily's voice stopped him. Jake, she whispered, her voice small and trembling. "Who is it?" Jake paused for a moment, his fingers tightening around the doorknob. "I don't know yet," he said, turning his head to look at her. Her wide, fearful eyes stared back at him. "Stay here. Don't open the door unless I say so." He moved quickly, silently unlocking the door and peering through the peephole. His heart skipped a beat when he saw who was standing on the other side. It was the man from before, the one who had been chasing Lily. Jake didn't hesitate. He knew what he had to do. He drew the blade from his pocket and cracked the door open just a sliver, enough to see the man more clearly. "What do you want?" Jake's voice was low, but it carried a threat that couldn't be ignored. The man didn't flinch. Instead, he just stared at Jake, his face twisted into a smug grin. "You really think you can keep her from me?" The words were slow, taunting, like he had all the time in the world. Jake's grip on the door tightened. "You need to leave, now." "I'm not going anywhere without her," the man shot back, his voice rising in anger. "She's mine, and I'm taking her back." Jake stepped back, pushing the door open slightly wider. He wasn't about to let this guy inside. "Not today," Jake said, his voice firm. The man sneered. "You don't understand, do you? She's not just some runaway. She's my property, and I'll do whatever it takes to get her back." Jake's blood ran cold at the words. "She's a person, not property," he said, the anger in his voice rising. "And I'm not letting you hurt her." The man's eyes narrowed, and in the blink of an eye, he lunged toward Jake. But Jake was faster. He swung the door open, catching the man off guard, and shoved him hard back into the parking lot. The man stumbled but quickly regained his footing. His eyes burned with rage, but Jake wasn't backing down. He moved quickly, standing between the man and the door, his body blocking the way. "This ends now," Jake said. The man sneered again, pulling something out of his jacket. A knife. Jake didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbing the man's wrist before he could bring the knife down. The two struggled, but Jake's strength and training quickly overpowered the man. He twisted the knife from the man's grip and threw it to the ground. "You're not taking her," Jake growled. The man's face twisted in fury as he glared at Jake, but there was a flicker of fear in his eyes now. Jake's grip tightened on his collar, pulling him close. "I don't care who you are or what you think you can do. You're not going near her again." The man took a step back, his shoulders slumping, defeated for the moment. "This isn't over," he spat, but Jake wasn't listening. He had one mission now: protect Lily. Jake shoved the man toward the parking lot, watching as he stumbled, not daring to fight back. "Leave, and don't come back," Jake warned, his voice low. The man didn't respond. He just turned and walked away, disappearing into the storm. Jake stood there for a moment, his breath heavy, trying to calm the adrenaline coursing through him. He knew this wasn't over. The man would be back. But for now, Lily was safe. He closed the door, locking it behind him. He turned to see Lily standing in the doorway, her face pale with fear. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, his voice softer now. Lily nodded, but her eyes still held that flicker of fear. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," Jake said, walking over to her. He kneeled down to her level, his voice gentle. "But I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. You're safe with me." Lily looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but also a hint of hope. "You really mean that?" she asked. Jake nodded, his expression serious. "I do." He stood up and moved to the window, glancing out at the empty parking lot. The storm still raged outside, but inside, Jake knew one thing for sure. He would do whatever it took to protect Lily. And no matter what came next, he wasn't going to back down. I stood by the window, watching the rain continue to pour down, the storm showing no signs of letting up. The air felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension that seemed to settle in the motel room. Jake's hands were still trembling slightly from the confrontation earlier, but his mind was sharp, alert. He had no intention of letting his guard down. The man he had pushed away was just a small part of something much bigger. Jake could feel it in his gut. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside his head, raw, unsettled, and dangerous. "Are you okay?" Lily's voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to see her standing in the doorway, her face still pale, but her eyes clearer now, the fear still present, though quieter. Jake forced a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm fine," he said, his voice steady. "You're safe now." She nodded, but there was something in her eyes, a look that spoke of more than just fear. She wasn't just scared of the man who had chased her. or even the storm that raged outside. She was scared of something deeper, something darker. Jake knew that feeling all too well. It was the same fear that had driven him all these years, that had kept him running, never settling. But now, with Lily here, he couldn't run anymore. He had to stay. He had to protect her. There was a knock at the door. Jake's heart skipped a beat, his body tensing automatically. It was too soon. The man from earlier couldn't be back already, could he? Jake motioned for Lily to stay back, his eyes narrowing as he moved quietly toward the door. He paused for a moment, listening. No one spoke from the other side, but Jake could feel the weight of someone waiting there, breathing, maybe even listening. He stepped cautiously toward the door, his hand resting lightly on the knob. He wasn't taking any chances. Slowly, he cracked the door open just a sliver, peering through. His eyes met the cold, unflinching gaze of another man. This one older, wearing the same leather jacket, the same Hell's Angels patch. Jake's muscles tightened. He recognized him instantly. The man was a member of his old chapter, someone from his past. Someone he had hoped he'd never see again. "Jake," the man said, his voice low but firm. "I need to talk to you." Jake didn't move. He knew this man well. He had been a part of the Brotherhood once. But that was before everything fell apart. Before the betrayals. Before the violence that had turned everything ugly. Jake had walked away from that life. He wasn't going back. "There's nothing to talk about," Jake replied, his tone as cold as the rain pounding against the window. "What do you want?" The man's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something, recognition, maybe. "Regret. I'm here for the girl," he said. "She's in danger, Jake. You don't know what you're dealing with." Jake's heart clenched. He had a feeling this was bigger than just some random guy chasing a little girl. "I'm not letting her go," Jake said, his voice hard, unwavering. "She's safe here." The man sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "You think this is over? You think you can protect her from everything that's coming? It's not just him, Jake. She's involved in something much bigger. People are looking for her, and they won't stop until they find her." Jake's mind raced, processing the man's words. The storm outside continued to rage, but the storm inside was just beginning. "What are you talking about?" Jake demanded. "Who's after her?" The man's eyes darkened. "Her father's not the only one who's been looking for her. There are people, powerful people, who have plans for her. She doesn't know it, but she's already caught in something much bigger than either of us." Jake's blood ran cold. He couldn't let her get caught up in that. He wouldn't. He had spent too many years running from his past, from the people who had controlled his life, from the Brotherhood that had once been his family. Now he was being dragged right back into it. "No," Jake said, his voice firm, resolute. "She's a kid. She doesn't deserve any of this. I'm getting her out of here." The man took a step back, his face tight with frustration. "You don't get it, do you?" he said. "They'll find her, Jake. They always do. And when they do, it won't be pretty. I'm trying to help you, but you're not listening." Jake didn't respond. He knew what he had to do. "If you want to help, you'll stay out of this," Jake said, his voice cold and final. "I'm not getting involved again. Not for you. Not for anyone." The man hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll be watching," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You won't be able to protect her forever." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the storm. Jake stood there for a moment, the weight of the man's words pressing down on him. But he didn't have time to dwell on it. He had to focus on Lily. She was still in danger. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm brewing in their lives. And Jake was determined to keep her safe, no matter the cost. I paced back and forth in the motel room, my thoughts a tangled mess of what the man had told me. There were people out there looking for Lily, people who wouldn't stop until they found her. And those people weren't just any strangers. They were powerful, dangerous. The storm outside continued to howl, but inside, the tension felt like a living thing, pressing down on me. I could feel Lily's presence in the room, her quiet breathing as she sat on the bed, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. She was scared. I could see it in her eyes. We both were. The knock on the door from earlier had shaken me, but I couldn't let Lily see that. She needed me to be strong, even if I was breaking inside. I had no idea who these people were or what they wanted with her, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them take her. I turned to her, my voice low and steady. "You're safe here, but we can't stay here long. I don't know who else might be looking for you." Lily nodded, her eyes still wide with fear. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. The words hit me harder than I expected. I had to swallow the lump in my throat before I could speak again. I won't let anyone take you back. You're not alone. She didn't say anything, but she gave me a small nod, a quiet sign of trust. I went over to the window, peering out through the slats of the blinds. The parking lot was empty, the wind kicking up dust and debris as the storm raged on. I kept scanning the area, every shadow, every car that passed. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were out there, waiting. The storm might have hidden us for now, but how long would that last? I turned back to Lily. We're going to leave, find someplace safer. She looked up at me, her expression filled with a quiet determination. She might have been small, but there was a strength in her that I couldn't ignore. She wasn't giving up. Neither would I. I grabbed my jacket, pulling it over my shoulders as I grabbed my keys. Come on, I said, holding out my hand. We're getting out of here. We walked down the hall of the motel in silence, our footsteps muffled by the storm outside. I could feel the weight of every moment, like the storm itself was pushing us forward, urging us to move faster. We reached the parking lot, and I could hear the low hum of my bike waiting for us, the rumble of the engine, a comfort I didn't realize I needed. I helped Lily onto the back, making sure she was steady before I climbed on myself. The wind whipped around us, making it harder to hear anything over the roar of the engine, but I could feel the tension between us. We were leaving the only place that had felt safe in days, and I wasn't sure where we were headed next. But I couldn't afford to think too much about that. We needed to keep moving. The engine roared to life as I pulled out of the parking lot, my eyes scanning the road ahead. The storm made it difficult to see anything more than a few feet ahead, but I kept going, trusting the feel of the bike beneath me. It was all I had left to rely on. Lily was silent behind me, but I could feel her grip tighten on my waist. I didn't know what kind of future we were facing, but I knew this wasn't over. I could feel the eyes of those who were hunting us, always watching, always waiting. We drove for hours, the storm pushing us farther into the night. I kept my focus on the road, trying to block out the thoughts of what might happen next. We couldn't stop for long. I didn't know where we were going, but we had to keep moving. Eventually, the rain let up, and the wind died down. The storm was still there, but it wasn't as fierce as it had been. I glanced back at Lily, checking to make sure she was still okay. Her face was pressed against my back, but I could feel her exhaustion. She'd been through so much already, and I could tell she was close to breaking. But she wasn't going to. Not while I was here. We reached a small town, nothing more than a few houses scattered along the highway. It was quiet, too quiet, and I knew it wasn't the safest place for us. But we had to rest. I pulled off the road, finding a place to park in the back of an old diner. The neon sign flickered, but the place seemed abandoned. I turned off the engine, the silence settling over us like a weight. We'll stay here for a bit, I said, my voice softer now. Lily didn't respond, but she nodded again. Her trust was something I couldn't take lightly. I helped her off the bike, and we made our way inside, the door creaking open with a faint groan. The inside was dim, with dust settled on the tables and chairs, like it hadn't been touched in years. I made sure the door was locked before I went to the counter and poured us both some water from a pitcher. Lily sat at a booth, her face drawn, but her eyes were clear, focused. She was still scared, but there was a quiet strength in her now. I could see it in the way she held herself, in the way she didn't look away when she spoke. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I set the glass of water down in front of her and sat across from her. "You don't need to thank me," I said, my voice low. "You're safe here. For now." The storm might have passed, but the real fight was just beginning. I knew we couldn't stay here long, but for the first time in days, I felt like we were taking control of the situation, like maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. I sat in the diner, the empty space around me feeling more like a cage than a refuge. The hum of the old fridge in the corner was the only sound, aside from the occasional creak of the floorboards. The storm had passed, but I could feel the weight of what was coming next pressing down on my chest. We couldn't stay here. I knew that much. The man from before, he wasn't the only one after Lily. There were others, powerful people who had no idea what it meant to show mercy, and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. I glanced over at Lily, sitting at the booth, her eyes fixed on the window, watching the rain fall in sheets. She hadn't said much since we arrived, but I could see the strain in her face. She was trying to hold it together, but the exhaustion, the fear, it was all still there. I couldn't let her face it alone. She'd been through too much already. I stood up, walking over to the counter and grabbing the half-filled glass of water I had left there. I drank it slowly, my mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. We couldn't keep running forever. I had to find a way to end this, before they found us, before they hurt her. I turned back to Lily. "Hey," I said, my voice soft. She turned her head, meeting my gaze, but she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I could see the question in her eyes, the uncertainty. "I know this has been a lot," I said, sitting down across from her. "But I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I promise." She nodded, her small fingers gripping the edge of the booth, but she didn't speak. I didn't push her to. She wasn't ready to talk yet, and I wasn't going to force her. The door to the diner creaked open, and for a moment, I thought it was just the wind. But then the sound of footsteps echoed in the small space, and I knew we weren't alone. I stood up quickly, my hand instinctively going to the knife I kept hidden in my jacket, ready to face whatever was coming through that door. But when I turned, my breath caught in my throat. It was him, the man I had pushed out of the motel room, the man who had been chasing Lily. He walked into the diner, his eyes scanning the room, until they locked on me. His face was set in a cold expression, but I could see the anger in his eyes, the fury building just beneath the surface. "I told you this wasn't over," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't know who you're dealing with." My hand tightened on the knife in my jacket, but I didn't move. I knew I couldn't let him see me flinch. "You need to leave," I said, my voice steady, though every muscle in my body was tense. "You're not taking her. Not now, not ever." The man smirked, as if he didn't take me seriously. "You think you can stop me? You really think you can protect her from everything that's coming?" He stepped forward, his boots making a heavy sound as they hit the floor, and I could feel the tension in the room growing. But I wasn't backing down. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, keeping my voice even. "And neither is she." I motioned to Lily, who was still sitting at the booth, her eyes wide with fear, but I could see the fire in her gaze. She wasn't running anymore. Not from him, not from anyone. "You don't know what you're messing with," the man said, his voice hardening. "She's not just some runaway. She's part of something much bigger than you." I frowned, confused for a moment. "What the hell are you talking about?" I demanded. "What does she have to do with you?" The man's smirk deepened, but there was something else in his eyes now, something cold and calculating. "Her father wasn't the only one who wanted her," he said. "She's caught up in something bigger, something that you can't stop." My heart sank as I realized what he was implying. This wasn't just some family drama. There were other forces at play here. Dangerous people who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. And now, Lily was in the middle of it all. The man took a step back, his hands raising slowly, as if he knew I wasn't going to back down. "I don't have time to explain," he said. "But I'll be back. And when I do, I'll take what's mine." He turned and walked out of the diner, leaving the door to swing closed behind him. I stood there for a long moment, my mind racing with the realization of what was really going on. The storm outside might have stopped, but the real danger was just beginning. "We have to go," I said to Lily, turning back to her. She was still sitting at the booth, her eyes wide with fear, but there was something else in them now. Something like determination. She was stronger than I realized. She wasn't going to let anyone push her around. "Let's go," I said, my voice firm. We didn't have much time. The man would be back, and we couldn't wait around to see what he had planned. We had to move. And we had to do it fast. I could feel the tension thickening between us as I helped Lily onto the back of my bike. The sound of the engine roaring to life echoed in the empty parking lot, the noise a sharp contrast to the otherwise still night. I kept my eyes on the rearview mirror, scanning the road behind us, but the place was still. For now, it felt like we were safe. But deep down, I knew we couldn't stay here for long. The man had been right about one thing. This wasn't just about her father anymore. There were bigger forces at play. I didn't know who they were or what they wanted, but I was certain they weren't going to let Lily slip through their fingers that easily. I revved the engine, the low rumble vibrating through me as I pulled out onto the highway. The wind whipped past us, and I could feel Lily's grip tightening around my waist, the tension in her body still palpable. She was trying to stay strong, but I knew she was scared. I couldn't blame her. Hell, I was scared too. We were both running from something we didn't fully understand, but I wasn't going to stop now. I wasn't going to let anything or anyone take her away. I glanced back at her as we drove, her eyes fixed forward, her face set in determination. It was a look I knew well, the kind of look someone had when they'd been through hell and back, but still kept going. "We need to find a place to lay low for a while," I said, breaking the silence. "I don't know how much time we have before they start looking for us again, but we can't keep moving forever." Lily didn't say anything at first, but after a moment, I heard her voice, quiet but firm. "Where are we going?" she asked. I didn't have a solid answer. I hadn't even thought that far ahead. I was just trying to keep her safe. "I don't know," I said, my voice low. "But we'll figure it out. We have to." We kept driving, the highway stretching on for miles, the road ahead uncertain. We passed a few small towns, but I didn't stop. I didn't want to risk being seen, not yet. The last thing I needed was someone recognizing us and tipping off the wrong people. Eventually, we reached a small, rundown motel at the edge of town. The sign was flickering, the neon lights barely visible in the growing darkness. It didn't look like much, but at this point, I didn't care. We needed a place to rest, somewhere we could regroup and plan our next move. I parked the bike and turned off the engine. The air was cool, but not too cold. It felt like a temporary calm before the storm. I helped Lily off the bike, and we made our way to the office. The clerk was an older man, his face wrinkled and tired. He looked up as we walked in, and I could see the suspicion in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. "One room," I said, sliding a few bills across the counter. "For the night." He nodded, handing me the key without a word. I wasn't sure if it was the way I looked or the way I carried myself, but I didn't want to take any chances. We made our way to the room in silence, and once inside, I locked the door behind us. The room was small, nothing fancy, but it had a bed and a bathroom, and that's all that mattered right now. I sat down on the bed, rubbing my hands over my face. The weight of everything was starting to catch up to me. I hadn't had a moment to breathe, let alone think about what was really happening. I didn't know who these people were, what they wanted with Lily, or how far they would go to get her back. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let that happen. Not on my watch. Lily sat down on the other side of the bed, her eyes still distant, like she was somewhere far away. I didn't want to push her, but I couldn't just let her sit there and carry this burden alone. "You want to talk about it?" I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be. She didn't answer right away. For a moment, I thought she might stay silent, but then she spoke, her voice small. "I don't know what to do anymore," she said. I could hear the sadness in her words, the vulnerability that she was trying so hard to hide. I looked at her, my heart aching. "You don't have to figure it out all at once," I said, trying to offer some comfort. "We'll take it one step at a time. We're in this together." She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine as if trying to figure out if I was telling the truth. "Do you think we'll be okay?" she asked. I took a deep breath, thinking about the uncertainty ahead. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But we'll make it through. We have to." She nodded, and for the first time since we'd met, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. She wasn't alone anymore, and I wasn't about to let her face the world on her own. The storm outside had passed, but the real battle was just beginning. And whatever happened next, I would be ready to fight. For her. For us. I woke up to the sound of a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat as I sat up, my mind instantly going into alert mode. The storm had passed, but the danger was far from over. Lily was still asleep, curled up on the bed in the corner of the room. I glanced over at her, making sure she was still okay. Her chest rose and fell with each breath, but her face was still tense, even in sleep. I couldn't help but feel the weight of the promise I had made to protect her. I wasn't sure how much longer we could keep running. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a voice. "Jake, I know you're in there." It was him again, the man from before, the one who had been chasing Lily. I stood up quietly, trying not to disturb Lily. I couldn't let her wake up to this. I slowly moved toward the door, my mind racing. What was he doing here? What did he want? I looked through the peephole, but there was no sign of him. I wasn't about to open the door without knowing what was on the other side. I moved quietly across the room, making sure not to make a sound. The storm outside was still raging, but the knock at the door felt like a warning. Whoever was out there wasn't here to talk. I grabbed the knife from my bag and slipped it into my pocket. I wasn't about to take any chances. I wasn't sure who this man was, but he had made it clear that he wasn't just some random guy. There was something more to this, something I didn't understand. I opened the door just a crack, my hand still resting on the knife. The man was standing there, his face cold and hard. He wasn't wearing a jacket this time, but his eyes were just as dangerous as before. "You've got no business here," I said, keeping my voice low, steady. "I'm not going anywhere without her," the man replied, his voice calm, but I could hear the underlying threat in his words. "She's not yours to keep. You need to give her back." I stepped out of the room, closing the door behind me. "I'm not giving her to anyone," I said firmly, standing my ground. "She's safe with me." The man stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "You think you can protect her?" he asked, almost as if he were amused. "You're just a biker. You have no idea what you're dealing with." My grip tightened on the knife. "I've dealt with worse," I said, my voice low and threatening. "And I'll deal with you if I have to." He didn't flinch. Instead, he took another step forward, his hand reaching into his jacket. For a moment, I thought he was going for a weapon, but he pulled out a small folder instead. "I don't want to do this, Jake," he said, his voice still calm, but the tension was thick in the air. "But if you keep her here, if you keep interfering, I won't have a choice." I didn't take my eyes off him. "What is this?" I asked, my voice sharp. He opened the folder slowly, revealing a series of photographs. They were blurry, but I could make out Lily's face in one of them, standing in front of a house, smiling. Another one showed her walking down a street, looking over her shoulder. "I've been following you," he said, his voice quieter now. "I know where she's been. I know what she's running from." I stared at the photos, my mind racing. How did he get these? How long had he been watching us? The fear in Lily's eyes flashed through my mind, and I knew that whatever he was about to say, it wasn't good. "You don't understand, Jake," he continued. "She's not just a runaway. She's part of something much bigger. Something that's going to tear you both apart if you don't let her go." I shook my head, trying to process his words. "I'm not giving her to you. Not now, not ever." The man took a deep breath, closing the folder and slipping it back into his jacket. "You're making a mistake," he said, his tone almost regretful. "I'm not the enemy here. But if you keep pushing this, if you keep refusing to let her go, you will be. There's more at stake here than you realize." With that, he turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the storm. I stood there for a moment, my mind spinning. What had he meant? What was Lily involved in? And who were these people who were after her? I went back into the room, closing the door behind me. Lily was still asleep, her face peaceful for the moment, but I could see the worry lines starting to form. She didn't deserve this. No one did. I sat down on the bed, my mind still reeling. Whoever these people were, they were dangerous, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. I didn't know what that was, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them have her. Not without a fight. I looked over at Lily again, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. She was just a kid. She shouldn't have to deal with this. And I was going to make sure she didn't have to face it alone. I stood up, grabbing my jacket. We had to leave. And this time, we weren't stopping until we found a place where they couldn't find us. I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me as I stepped outside into the cold night air. The storm had passed, but the tension in the air was palpable. Lily was safe, for now, but that wouldn't last. I wasn't sure how much longer we could keep running, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being hunted, that someone, somewhere, was always one step behind us. The man had made it clear that Lily wasn't just any runaway. She was caught up in something bigger, something dangerous. But what was it? And why had it come? After her. I pushed the thoughts aside for now. I had to stay focused. We had to keep moving. I walked over to the bike, my boots crunching against the gravel. The engine roared to life as I mounted it, the low hum of the machine grounding me in the present. I glanced over at Lily, who was standing by the door, watching me with those wide, uncertain eyes. She was scared, I could see it, but there was something else in her gaze. A quiet strength, the kind that comes from surviving things no child should have to endure. I motioned for her to get on. "We're not stopping this time," I said, trying to offer her some reassurance. "We'll figure this out. But we need to keep moving." Lily nodded and climbed on behind me. I felt her arms wrapped tightly around my waist, and I could sense the tension in her body, the fear she was still trying to hide. But we didn't have time to talk about it. We didn't have time for anything but to run. The bike roared to life, and we sped down the road, the wind whipping against us as we drove through the dark night. The headlights of my bike cut through the darkness, but the road ahead was uncertain. I didn't know where we were going, only that we had to keep moving. I could hear the hum of the engine, the only sound beside the wind, But even that wasn't enough to drown out the thoughts racing through my head. What had the man meant when he said that Lily was part of something bigger? What was it she was running from? And how was I supposed to protect her from something I didn't understand? The miles seemed to stretch on forever as we drove through the night. I kept my eyes on the road, but every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following us. It was irrational, I knew that, but it didn't make the feeling go away. We drove for what felt like hours, the storm now a distant memory, but the weight of what we were running from still hanging over us. It wasn't until the sun began to rise that I found a place to stop. A small town on the outskirts of nowhere. I pulled into a gas station and parked the bike, glancing around. It was quiet, too quiet. The kind of town where nothing ever happened, where people kept to themselves. It seemed like a good place to lay low for a while. I didn't trust it, but we needed a break. I looked over at Lily, who was still holding onto me tightly, her face pale in the dim light of the morning. "We're going to be okay," I said, even though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. She didn't answer, but I saw her nod. That was enough for now. I grabbed the helmet from the bike and handed it to her. "Come on, let's get some rest. We can figure things out after we catch our breath." We walked into the small convenience store, the bell above the door jingling softly as we entered. The clerk behind the counter looked up briefly, but didn't say anything. I could feel his eyes on us, like he was trying to figure out who we were, what we were doing here. I didn't care. I walked up to the counter, my hand casually resting on the edge. "2 rooms, please," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. The clerk hesitated for a moment, but then nodded and handed over the keys. "Rooms 6 and 7, he said, his voice low, as if he didn't want to get involved. I nodded and walked back to Lily, who was waiting near the door. We headed for the rooms, not saying much, but I could feel the weight of everything between us. She was still scared, and I couldn't blame her. I was too. We got to the rooms, and I locked the door behind us as we stepped inside. The place was small, run down, but it was enough for a short rest. Lily immediately went to the bed and sat down, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. I stood by the window, looking out at the empty street. It was peaceful here, but the calm only made the fear sharper. I didn't know how long we had until someone found us. I didn't know how much longer I could keep her safe, but I couldn't stop now. I wouldn't. After a few minutes, I turned around and walked over to her, sitting down beside her. "You okay?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She nodded but didn't look up. I could see the tears in her eyes, the weight of everything she had been through. She didn't deserve this. I reached out and placed my hand on her shoulder. "We're in this together. You're not alone anymore. I promise." She finally looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. For the first time in a while, I saw something other than fear in her eyes, hope. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't know what the future held, but for now, I was going to do everything I could to protect her. We couldn't stay here forever, but we had time to figure things out. And I was going to make sure she was safe, no matter what. I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind still reeling from everything that had happened. The motel room was quiet now, the sound of rain outside filling the space where words had once been. Lily had finally fallen asleep, her small frame curled beneath the blanket. She needed the rest, and I needed to think. The man, he was right about one thing. We couldn't keep running forever. But where else could we go? I had no answers. The only thing I knew was that I couldn't let anyone take her. Not again. I stood up slowly, walking over to the window and peering out at the street. It was still quiet, the kind of eerie silence that made me uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. I had to admit it, I was scared. Not for myself, but for her. Lily had been through so much already, and I couldn't protect her from everything. I had to keep moving, but the uncertainty of the situation gnawed at me. My thoughts were interrupted by a sound at the door. A soft knock. My body went stiff. Who was it this time? I moved toward the door cautiously, my hand resting on the handle of the knife I always kept close. I peered through the peephole, but all I could see was the dim light from the street lamp outside. I cracked the door open just enough to get a better look. There was no one there. But then, I saw it. A piece of paper, shoved under the door. I bent down and picked it up, unfolding it carefully. The handwriting was scrawled in a hasty, almost frantic way, the words barely legible. "She's not safe. They know where you are. You need to leave now." My stomach churned as I read the note over and over again. I knew they were after her, but this felt different. This felt personal. I looked back at Lily, who was still asleep, her face peaceful for the moment. But I knew that peace wouldn't last. I had to make a decision, and I had to make it fast. I walked over to the bed, shaking her gently. "Lily," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She stirred but didn't wake. I shook her a little harder. "Lily, wake up." Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at me, confusion clouding her face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice hoarse from sleep. I held up the note. "We're leaving," I said, my voice steady but urgent. "Pack up. We don't have much time." She nodded, sitting up slowly. "Where are we going?" Her question hung in the air like a weight. I didn't have an answer. "I don't know," I said, my voice quieter now. "But we can't stay here. Not anymore." I watched as she started gathering her things, her movements slow and deliberate. She was trying to keep it together, but I could see the fear in her eyes. We both knew what was coming. We couldn't outrun this forever. But for now, we had to keep moving. I grabbed my jacket, slipping it on as I checked the window one last time. The street was still empty. I didn't trust it. It was too quiet. I opened the door cautiously, scanning the parking lot before stepping outside. I motioned for Lily to follow. We walked quickly, not speaking, just moving in sync as we made our way to the bike. The engine roared to life as I started it up, the sound loud in the otherwise silent night. Lily climbed onto the back, and we drove off into the night, the road ahead uncertain but the danger clear. As we sped down the road, I couldn't help but feel like we were running out of time. The world outside was just a blur, and the only thing I could focus on was keeping Lily safe. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights tailing us, but there was nothing. The road stretched out endlessly before us, and for a moment, I thought we might actually make it. But deep down, I knew better. I couldn't outrun them forever. Eventually, they would catch up. We had to find somewhere to hide, somewhere they wouldn't find us. The next town wasn't far, but I didn't know if it would be enough. I was running on instinct now, and I hoped it would be enough to keep us both alive. We rode for hours, the wind howling around us, the sound of the bike a constant in the quiet of the night. Lily was holding on tight, her arms wrapped around my waist, but I could feel the tension in her body. She was scared, and I couldn't blame her. She had every reason to be. We pulled into a small, run-down town and stopped at a gas station. I glanced around, checking the area for any signs of danger. The place was empty, but I wasn't taking any chances. I helped Lily off the bike and walked toward the small convenience store. Inside, the clerk barely looked up, too busy with his own business to notice us. I grabbed a bottle of water and some snacks, then turned to Lily. "We'll stay here for a while," I said. "But we have to keep moving." She nodded, and we walked back outside, back to the bike. I didn't know where we were going next, but I knew we had to keep moving. We couldn't stay in one place for long. The danger was always there, lurking just out of sight, waiting for us to make a mistake. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Not while she was with me. Not while I had the chance to protect her. I could feel the unease settle in as we left the gas station behind, the road stretching ahead like a never-ending ribbon of uncertainty. The night was cold, but the tension in the air made it feel even colder. The only sound was the wind whipping past us and the hum of the motorcycle engine, a constant reminder that we were running, always running. Lily was still holding on to me, her arms wrapped around my waist, but I could feel her body trembling against mine. She was trying to stay calm, trying to stay strong, but I could tell she was scared. And honestly, so was I. I didn't know where we were going, just that we had to keep moving. We couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. The road was empty, the only light coming from the bike's headlights cutting through the darkness. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights behind us, but the road was still clear. For a moment, I thought maybe we had escaped. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that easy. They wouldn't stop. Whoever was after Lily, whoever had been hunting her, they would keep coming. I couldn't outrun them forever. I thought about what the man had said, the one who had left the note. She's part of something bigger. What did that even mean? And why had he come after her? I didn't have the answers. I didn't know who was pulling the strings, but I wasn't going to let them get their hands on her. Not without a fight. The miles passed, and still, no sign of anyone following us. We reached a small town, barely more than a few buildings strung along the highway. I pulled into a dimly lit parking lot of a motel, its neon sign flickering in the distance. It wasn't much, but it was a place to rest. A place to figure out what to do next. We had to make a plan. I parked the bike and turned off the engine. The silence in the air was deafening, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world had stopped. I looked over at Lily, who was still sitting on the bike, her face pale in the dim light of the motel. She didn't look at me, but I could feel the weight of her fear, the same fear I had been carrying for days. We didn't speak as we walked into the motel office, but the clerk behind the counter eyed us suspiciously as we walked up. I didn't care. I just needed a place to lay low for a few hours, to rest, to figure out our next move. One room, I said, my voice low but firm. The clerk didn't ask any questions, just handed me the key to a room in the back. I didn't care how run down it was. It would be enough for the night. I walked back to the bike, and Lily followed me in silence. The weight of what we were facing hung in the air between us. I could feel the fear in her, but also a quiet strength that I hadn't noticed before. She was scared, but she wasn't breaking. Not yet. We made our way to the room, and I locked the door behind us. The room was small, the walls thin, but it was enough for now. I turned to Lily, who had sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands in her lap. She looked lost in thought, her mind clearly racing with the same questions I had. What now? Where do we go from here? I sat down beside her, taking a deep breath. We'll figure this out, I said, my voice steady, though I didn't believe it myself. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, looking for reassurance. I didn't have much to give. I promise, I added, even though I wasn't sure if I could keep that promise. I wasn't sure how much longer we could keep running. The clock was ticking. I stood up and paced around the small room, trying to come up with a plan. The man who had warned me, the one who had left the note, he was right. We couldn't stay here long. I had no idea who else was out there, who else was looking for her, but I knew they would be relentless. And we couldn't afford to be found. I turned back to Lily, who was still sitting on the bed, her gaze distant. We need to keep moving, I said, more to myself than to her. She nodded slowly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of determination in her eyes. Where will we go? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. I didn't have an answer. I don't know, I said honestly. But we'll figure it out. One step at a time. We had to keep moving, keep running, because as much as I wanted to protect her, I knew that the danger wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The storm outside had passed, but a new one was coming, and I wasn't going to let it tear us apart. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the window. For a moment, I thought it was just another quiet morning, but then I remembered. The storm had passed, but the real storm was just beginning. I glanced over at Lily, still asleep on the bed, her body curled up tightly, as though she were trying to protect herself from the world. She had been through so much already, and I could feel the weight of her fear even when she was asleep. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the small town we had found refuge in for the night. The streets were quiet, empty, and for a moment, it felt like everything might be okay. But I knew better. There was no safe place for us. No place where they wouldn't find us eventually. The man who had left the note, the man who had been after Lily, he wasn't going to stop. And neither was I. I wasn't going to let him take her. I couldn't. I turned back to Lily, watching her sleep for a moment longer. She was so young, too young to be caught up in all of this. She shouldn't have to face any of this. But she was here now, and I had made a promise to protect her. I wasn't going to break that promise. I went over to the bed and gently shook her awake. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, she didn't seem to remember where she was. But then she looked up at me, and I saw the recognition in her eyes. We have to keep moving, I said, my voice low but firm. We can't stay here. It's not safe. She didn't say anything at first, just sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes as she tried to adjust to the reality of what was happening. I could see the exhaustion in her face, the weight of everything she had been through pressing down on her. But she didn't complain. She just nodded, like she understood that this was the only choice we had. We gathered our things in silence, and I could see Lily's eyes darting nervously toward the door. She was scared, I could see it in the way she clutched her bag, but there was something else there too. A determination. She wasn't giving up, and that made me want to fight harder. I grabbed my jacket and checked the room one last time, making sure we hadn't left anything behind. The storm outside had cleared, but the unease in the air still hung heavy. We walked out of the motel room, the quiet of the morning only making the tension feel more oppressive. I could feel eyes on us, even if I couldn't see them. The world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. We walked across the parking lot to the bike, and I helped Lily on before starting the engine. I revved the bike a few times, feeling the rumble of the engine beneath me, but even the sound of the bike couldn't drown out the fear that was gnawing at me. The road stretched ahead, but I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know where we could go. We could keep moving, but the truth was we were running out of options. We rode for hours, the landscape changing from small towns to barren fields, and still, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. The road was empty, but that didn't make me feel any safer. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights behind us, but the road remained clear. For now, I was beginning to feel the weight of the past few days. The constant moving, the constant fear. It was exhausting. We couldn't keep running forever. Lily's grip around my waist tightened, and I could feel her body pressing against mine. She was scared, but she wasn't showing it, and I was proud of her for that. We reached another small town, this one even quieter than the last. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the empty streets. I pulled into the first available parking lot, my mind still racing. I didn't know where we were, and I didn't know who we could trust. But we couldn't keep moving without a plan. We needed to rest. We needed to regroup. I parked the bike and turned it off, listening to the engine's fading hum before the world fell into an eerie silence. "We need to find a place to stay," I said, my voice tired. Lily didn't answer, but she nodded, her face pale. We both knew the truth. Wherever we went, we would be looking over our shoulders, wondering if we were being followed, if someone was closing in. We walked toward the nearest motel, and I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. This wasn't over. The worst part was knowing we couldn't stay here for long. I wasn't sure where the next stop would be. I wasn't sure what would happen when they finally caught up to us. But for now, all I could do was keep her safe, keep moving, and keep her alive. I led Lily into the motel office, and the clerk didn't even look up as we walked in. I handed him some money for a room, and he handed me a key without asking any questions. I didn't care. The only thing that mattered was that we had a place to rest. I turned to Lily as we walked toward the room. "Stay close," I said, my voice low. "We don't know who we can trust." She nodded, her hand slipping into mine, and we walked down the hallway. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something worse than anything we had already faced. But for now, we were safe, and that would have to be enough. In this gripping tale of survival, danger, and mystery, the story of a young girl on the run and a Hell Angels member determined to protect her unfolds against a backdrop of relentless threats. As the girl finds herself hunted by dangerous forces, the true meaning of family, loyalty, and sacrifice comes to light. These Hell Angels stories delve into the struggles of two individuals caught in a storm of violence, secrets, and lies. Throughout the journey, the bond between them strengthens, showing the power of determination and the will to fight for survival. Each twist and turn of their story brings them closer to the truth, but the shadow of danger looms large. As the tension rises and the stakes grow higher, the true strength of the Hell Angels stories is revealed. Prepare to be captivated as you follow their perilous escape from the past and the growing threat from unseen enemies. With every move they make, they must confront the shadows of their past and the risks of their future. The haunting question of who will survive remains unanswered in these Hell Angels stories, making it a must-read for fans of intense, action-packed drama. Will they manage to escape the clutches of those who seek to destroy them, or will the darkness close in? Don't miss out on these thrilling Hell Angels stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end.